Sleepy Sheepy here. Today we're going to be looking at a level 125 Dexterity build using Poison Raptor Talons. We'll be putting 60 points into Vigor, 25 into Endurance, 55 into Dexterity, however we will be using Millicent's Prosthesis, which gives us another 5, and then we'll put 22 into Arcane. This isn't the most optimal way to get the max AR for Poison Raptor Talons, however the additional Arcane scaling is going to boost our poison buildup, so I opted to put a little bit more points into Arcane than is necessary, but the best scaling is going to come from Dexterity. As for our armor, we'll be wearing the Mushroom Crown, since this does boost our AR when we proc poison, as well as the Tree Sentinel armor, Exile Gauntlets, and Tree Sentinel Greaves. We'll also be wearing the Bulgo Talisman to give us 1-on-1 poise, the Kindred Rots of Exaltation Talisman, and that's also going to boost our AR when we proc poison, and then Rotten Wing Sword Insignia, as well as Millicent's Prosthesis. These two are both going to raise our successive attacks, so that's going to really boost AR when we land a couple hits in a row. In addition to those two talismans, we'll also be using the Thorny Crack Tier, which is going to boost our successive attacks even further, so that's going to be pretty helpful as we land multiple hits in a row, and then the Crimson Bubble Tier, which is going to restore our HP when we're near death. The moveset for this weapon is going to be one of my favorites, so we have access to all the normal kind of claw type weapon attacks, which has light attack chains that are pretty normal, backstep attacks that come out as kind of a simultaneous slash, regular kind of heavy attacks, and jumping attacks that are, you know, not great in terms of damage output, but they are very fast and they do lack a little bit of range. But kind of to compensate for that, we do have access to this charged heavy that I love. So you can kind of space your opponent and go in for a charged heavy, and then if you want to do another charged heavy out of it, you can also get kind of that backward momentum. So having that forward momentum is really nice. If you can space your opponent well and they've got a colossal sword or something, they can swing and you can kind of charge your heavy attack while just out of reach, and then when they finish swinging, you can kind of time it so that heavy attack lands while they're still in their recovery animation. So that's a great option there. This weapon doesn't have a ton of poise damage, so we're going to be using Crag Blade as one of our Ashes of War. This is going to be really great, especially if you're going for the true combo where you can kind of run and do a heavy attack and then follow it up with another heavy attack, and that's going to be super strong with the Millicent's Prosthesis as well as Rotten Wing Sword Insignia. And then I also put on Lifesteal Fist. So this Ash of War is not great. It's pretty bad, honestly, but it's a lot of fun to use. So I feel like if an invasion's going well, or you want to just kind of have a little fun in a duel or something, using Lifesteal Fist is just kind of a fun element. So you'll see me use that sometimes and just kind of practice it. You can't roll catch with it, which is a bit of a bummer. So shout out to Gigasticus for kind of putting that video together, and honestly for most of the claw and true combo related content out there in general. But yeah, it's just going to be a great option to, you know, have a little bit of fun. And then you could put something like Endure or even Flaming Strike, although it wouldn't be poison infused. So lots of good options, but Lifesteal Fist and Crag Blade were the two that I went with. That pretty much covers everything that I wanted to say about the build, moveset, and strategy. If you have any questions, definitely let me know in the comments. And as always, if you wouldn't mind considering subscribing, I'd really appreciate it. But yeah, that's all I've got. So let's go ahead and jump into the invasions and arena content. All right, so jumping into our first invasion, we're going to be in a 3v1 in the Halig Tree area, and this is going to be a pretty fun group of people. We have somebody with the Radahn's Greatsword, so we're going to be looking out for the gravity attacks. We also have somebody with the Falling Jar colossal weapon, so we're going to need to look out for Gravity Bolt, which is that projectile that we just saw on screen there that is pretty dangerous. You can definitely get caught by it a bunch of times, and it's especially difficult to deal with in a 3v1 if you have no cover, because people can kind of just spam that. And we also have the Astel Wing, which is also very spammable. So I feel like the player with the Astel Wing is going to be my easiest target, mostly because they have the lowest poise. So I can tell just by their armor that I'm going to be able to poise break them pretty easily, and so they're just a quick turn and burn with a light attack is enough to take care of that player, and that's going to help me out a lot because that AoE associated with their Ash of War is no longer going to be taking up a bunch of space. And this player is, you know, using their Ash of War sometimes, but there they go for a couple colossal swings, and those colossal swings are slow enough for me to whiff punish, and I'm able to kind of just blender them real quick. So we have the player with the Radahn swords go for their Ash of War, and that was a little bit of a slow move, so I'm able to just run in and backstab them, and now they're pretty low health, so the chase down begins, and I can kind of get some jumping attacks off as an Estus punish, and then just kind of go for some light attacks in their general vicinity, and that's enough to get their little bit of HP that's left. So One thing that's worth noting is that poison doesn't always proc before you kill your opponent, so just the buff stacking associated with successive attacks can be fast enough to kill your opponent before you poison them. So in this next invasion, we have a moment where, I was doing pretty well against the host, but thought there was a phantom in the area, so thought I'd go for them first. They start using Rivers of Blood while I'm in the Rot Breath spam, and here I just go for a wake up with the Lifesteal Fist, and was pretty happy about landing that. That was just kind of a nice way to kind of grab my opponent if they roll or walk into me. So you can't really grab them on the roll, but you can if they're walking or attacking, you'll be able to grab them. So that worked out pretty nicely. This next invasion, I kind of spawn in and immediately get hit with Moonveil, but I still have iframes, so I begin going after this opponent, and they have some well-timed rolls that allows them to get down to this area with their friends, and they were in a great spot because the friend was like already buffing them with the kind of healing incantation. So they come back to full health, and I kind of need to start back over from scratch because really I'm now dealing with a 3v1 rather than a 1v1. So I kind of back off and try to bait them into these tunnels. The tunnels are going to be advantageous just because if I can poise break my opponent and get some just kind of quick blender damage with my claw weapons, maybe on one of them, they're all kind of going to be running behind and into each other. So that allows me to maybe just kind of blender some of them very quickly without getting flanked on either side. So I start throwing some roped volcano pots just to kind of give myself some space. I want to reapply my buff, and then I also might want to toss some freezing pots. It's not a bad time to try to get somebody like running through a doorway. I don't manage to hit, but it wasn't a bad move. And then when they're kind of getting locked on to the PvE, I'm able to grab one of them. Somebody goes for Grail's Roar, and I think I kind of caught them off guard by continuously being aggressive. So I was pretty low health and kind of took a risk there, but was able to kind of catch up to them before they got off their next dragon incantation. And then the chase down on the host begins. So they're going for some, spells, and they also have the Coated Sword, which can definitely do a lot of damage, but they only have one of them, so the dual Coated Sword moveset would have been a little bit scarier. And they also have almost no poise, so with Cragblade Claws, I'm in a great spot to kind of begin lots of just kind of quick attacks and stagger them a little bit, so if they do get kind of the roll catch timing that I'm going for, the variation of me staggering my attacks should be enough to kind of at least land one attack, which is really all I need at that point. Next up we have a 2v1, and this one is just a very quick one where I'm able to land a bunch of successive attacks and kind of keep that buff really engaged. And we have a player going for a lot of bleed-based attacks, so they've got the White Mask, and they've got a Thrusting Sword as well as a Moog Spear, and here they just go for one Thrusting Sword. I take advantage of the fact that I have pretty high poise and am able to just kind of trade with them and win that. So this next invasion was one that I thought was going to be pretty easy, but ended up being fairly difficult. So I believe this player was light rolling the Phantom here, and light roll is very difficult to deal with these types of weapons just because the range is so bad to begin with, and if they can roll just totally out of range of your fully charged heavy attack or a running attack, you're going to be having a hard time chasing them down. And then we also have a player with the Reduvia Bloodblade, which is just a constant projectile that can really do a ton of damage. It does lots of blood loss buildup, and also just the damage per hit is a lot. So this player is doing a decent job of trying to counter my build with something like Catch Flame, and I'm trying to utilize the stairs and just the overall kind of changes in terrain to avoid the incoming blood loss spam from Reduvia's Bloodblade. So I think kind of backing away and then trying to trade a little bit with the Phantom is kind of the best I can do, just because anytime I try to go for a chase down on the Phantom, they're doing a good job of just kind of rolling out, and I can't catch up with them because they are light rolling. So you can see just how far they get away in just those couple light rolls, and I need to kind of back off, regroup, and get back to full health. And I'm also trying to keep an eye on my blood loss meter, so if this player with Bloodblade does start hitting me again, I can tank a few hits before I die. I also need to be pretty cautious to time my rolls appropriately so that I don't get hit with the Giant's Flame Take Thee, which could, one-shot me just with normal potential, but it also could take me off and knock me off the edge there and kind of kill me. So here I finally get a couple consecutive hits on my opponent. I think they were trying to cast their incantation, and I was able to stun lock them a couple times and just, blunder them real quickly. So now it's just a one-on-one with the host, and the pressure from the Phantom allows me to, kind of chase this down in a pretty decent fashion. So there you could see I went for a charged heavy, and that extra distance helped me roll catch my opponent. So I definitely like the charged heavy as a roll catch. And at this point, I feel like I'm really in the driver's seat, so I can switch over to Lifesteal Fist. And this is totally unnecessary, but what I do here is I'm chasing them down so closely that they can't heal. So here I give them some space and know that they're going to go for some heals, and I want to combo that into Lifesteal Fist. Mostly just because I think it's fun Ash of War, and just trying to understand the psychology of your opponent better, I think, is always a fun thing to do. So that's a potential option you can go for if they have very low health and you want to land Lifesteal Fist. Just kind of back off a little bit, let them heal, and if they have to heal twice, that's going to put them in a great spot for you to land Lifesteal Fist. So that ended up working out well, and we were able to kind of get the win on a duo that was definitely potentially kind of scary. So this next invasion was very quick on the Phantom. They died almost straight away, and then here I thought I was going to get Fogwalled, but then they came back in, and this was just a nice moment where I could show off the fully charged heavy. So there you can see how much distance that fully charged heavy does get, and then I'm able to land it again as just a roll catch. So I don't think the move is particularly well understood by just your average co-opper, and I think they try to space you frequently and then misjudge how much range you're actually going to end up having. So I think I'll be using the Raptor Talons again in the future. I just had so much fun with that charged heavy, and then all the successive attack bonuses, plus it's great with poison. It's just all a really fun build to use. So I very much enjoyed that. Next up we have a 3v1, and I get hit with some magic spam and know that, you know, utilizing some hallways and some of the PvE is going to be important. So here we have the wizard kind of come in all by themselves, and while they're going for Ashes of Wars and spells, they do get stun locked by both me and the PvE, and that's enough to kind of end their life. So that was pretty helpful to have the PvE involved in this particular invasion. The damage output was very high from all parties involved. You can see about half my health went away with just that Ash of War, and there I got hit by those pest threads, which I was kind of amazed about. They just went straight through the wall, so that's something good to know. Tracking on projectiles is always a little bit weird, but here you can see just what happens when we do get all those successive attack bonuses working at the same time. So I'm able to just kind of land a couple hits on everybody all at once, and hitting multiple opponents at the same time with successive attack bonuses is going to be huge for damage output. This next invasion was a, definitely set up ahead of time gank squad. You can kind of see they've got, lots of poke weapons, and they also have, I believe, Barrier of Gold or something that's going to ensure that they take a little bit less damage. And I managed to kind of catch both of them simultaneously in a couple of stun locks that are enough to get quite a bit of damage off and kill the Phantom, and so it ends up being a one-on-one with me and the host. However, this does take a little while. I go into my menu at a pretty bad time and almost die, so definitely make sure that you have kind of the ability to back up if you're going to go into your menu, and kind of respect the dual cross Naginatas. So I did say this was a one-on-one. We do have another Phantom that comes in, but the host was they had enough forward momentum to really allow them to stay out of range for most of my attacks, or they would just kind of heal continuously. So I had a hard time working with this co-invader, and ultimately I kind of got to a spot where I was trying to, either distract the Phantom, or the host rather, enough, or just kind of protect the Phantom as much as I could, or the host, or invader rather, sorry. But eventually just kind of the blood loss buildup was too much, and the guard breaking that the host was able to do was pretty effective. So things start to reset back to neutral here. I'm pretty close to killing my opponent, but they are able to roll out, and they just manage to get some heals in. So now it's a pretty much even one-on-one at this point, where they have full health, as do I, and here I can kind of begin reverse blendering them. Just me having as much poise as I do was pretty much the determining factor in me being able to get off some stun locks and kind of catch my opponent in a spot where I could win that invasion. Next up we have a 2v1, and this is also going to be just kind of another example of utilizing the fully charged heavy. So here I'd go for it pretty much early on and try to get one or both of them in that moment, but don't manage to. And I do manage to hit a freezing pot, so they do have a little bit less damage negation. And here's where the fully charged heavy comes into play. They go for that swing, and I go for a fully charged heavy after it. So I talked about that a little bit in the intro, and Colossal Swords are really great for that, where you're able to kind of time the jump forward till after the swing happens, but they're still in their recovery frame, so they can't really do anything about it. And now they're kind of just panic rolling. Eventually I do manage to get a nice roll catch in that does like the last couple bits of HP, and now we're back to neutral just with the host. So I start going for some life fist steal, which definitely, again, isn't necessary, but is pretty fun. The dual katana setup is something that I know I can poise through, and so that's going to be pretty helpful when determining if you're going to be able to land lifesteal fist. So here I am able to just kind of tank a couple of their hits. Utilizing it with Endure or something like the Opaline Hard tier that is going to give you tons and tons of poise for a moment is a great way to utilize it as well, because having extra poise and not getting knocked out of that hyper armor is pretty helpful. So next up we have a 2v1 in Lanedale, again, kind of bleed-based gank. So we have 2 players with dual curve swords and lots of blood loss build-up. So I'm trying to be wary of that and pick my moments again. So I, keep my blood loss meter low, and then we have players switching over to the Black Blade, and then we have some Blasphemous Blade spam as well. So definitely stuff to be wary of, but when we have the host go for Blasphemous Blade, that leaves me with enough time to just kind of get a couple quick stun locks and attacks off on the Phantom and just kind of blender them very quickly. So now we're back to like a one-on-one situation. I'm trying to avoid incoming attacks while also find some windows of opportunity. And here I was thinking I was going to set up for a parry, but ultimately decided not to in the end. So I swap off on my parry shield and then get hit with Moonveil. So definitely a swap that I wasn't expecting. I probably should have paid a little bit closer attention to their weapon choice. And I'm pretty much just getting set up, but then you see that heavy attack that definitely connected doesn't do any damage until a second or two later. So I realized that this is not going to be a good candidate to parry, and I'll probably be better off just kind of running in, landing some hits, and then backing off. So that's kind of exactly what happens at the end there, where I run in and then kind of back off because I know that my hits have landed, but they just haven't connected yet. And that's what I recommend doing for sure, because if your opponent starts rolling, they'll have a potential to roll that damage when it comes late. So really just backing off and having them chase you is going to be your best bet. So this next invasion was some of the most Ash of War spam I've seen just in a long time. So I really had a hard time kind of getting around here. I start getting hit with it, and then we also have the Duels Moonblade, which is, doing frostbite damage. So I was frankly amazed that I didn't die in this situation. My opponent runs out of FP at a really optimal time for me that allows me to heal, and I'm able to run in while the host is distracted with PvE and just get a couple quick hits in, which is enough to kind of take care of them. And then I'm not totally out of the woods. I do need to heal a little bit, but now my opponent is kind of on the back foot. It's me and some PvE kind of chasing them through a cave, and I believe that they're light rolling, so that is, an added layer of difficulty. I'm just trying to do my best to stay as close to them, and then, if possible, land a couple hits while running or whatnot. So they definitely get ahead of me. I was kind of worried that they were going to fog wall me, but instead they go for, you guessed it, another Ash of War spam. So that was not totally surprising, but I had enough poise to just kind of take some of the incoming hits and land a couple of my own. And I give a nice sarcastic clap to demonstrate how much I appreciated that Ash of War spam. This next invasion was mostly just added because of the amount of lifesteal fist involved. So very quickly we're able to kind of chase down the Phantom, and then we have a player that is a great kind of test subject for lifesteal fist. Somebody who is utilizing weapons with very long recovery frames, which is going to be great. So basically my plan here is to wait for them to go for their jumping attack, dodge it, and then wait for them to attack again and kind of catch them during that second attack. So here we can see it works the first time, and it's pretty solid. I go for a wake up with lifesteal fist, but it doesn't really work, and then just land a little bit of additional damage. And then here we can see that happen again, where they are in their recovery frames, and then they go for another attack, which is just slow enough where I'm able to land lifesteal fist again. And then I believe that they go for it possibly one more time, or there I'm able to get a kind of catch with the Estus, so that's definitely another good time to go for Lifesteal Fist. And then here they go for it one more time, where they even land some of the damage, but I have a little bit of hyper armor at that stage of Lifesteal Fist, and I'm able to grab that for the kill. So definitely a fun invasion there, and just a nice kind of educational moment when it came to Lifesteal Fist. This last invasion here is going to be kind of an interesting one. I just really like the environment that was kind of taking place here, and also there's some strange elements when it came to how characters were loading in. But basically having this giant platform that moves up and down is much more interesting than invading in, you know, Lakes of Liurnia or something. It just adds an element of kind of, I don't know, uniqueness to the space, and also can really catch these phantoms off guard. I'm not sure if the spikes do damage to invaders, but in my experience, it seemed like they didn't. So there I kind of got knocked into the ceiling once and didn't seem to take any damage, and then we'll see later that comes into play again, where the ceiling is very centrally involved. So I'm trying to dodge some of the incoming magic spam as well as the Moon Veil, and here I'm in kind of a bad spot when the third player does come in as well. And I wasn't really sure how they got there, but it definitely was a little bit difficult. Fortunately, one Phantom runs out of FP, and I don't get fully blood lost, so that was definitely fortunate there. And I want to get kind of the spiked ceiling involved as much as possible, so I try to bait them forward. I know that if I run into that room and I stay in that room, I'm definitely going to die. With two of them, it was quite a bit to deal with, and with a third, it was, you know, basically a death sentence. So I'm going to try to shoot through the ground here. That's something that's nice about the lightning bolt, is that even if you're underneath the player, if the kind of boundary between the player and yourself is thin enough, the lightning bolt can go through and still do damage. So I reapply my buff for Cragblade and also try to get some of the lightning involved and just try not to get stuck back there. I want to have a way out. And that moment right there, I think, was probably a good moment for a turn and burn. So a second or two later, I do actually start going for that turn and burn. But here we can see I don't seem to take damage on the ceiling at all. And I'm able to kind of watch the Phantom there get, you know, knocked down by the ceiling, and it was just kind of a rewarding moment where, you know, they had been sending a lot of magic projectiles my way and could kind of see the environment kind of catch them. So I reapply my buff and begin the chase down on the other two. I think they were kind of over the ceiling being involved, and honestly, I can't really blame them. So I hop down and just try to catch them. The host is, you know, kind of booking it for the end of this level, and the Phantom gets left behind, and when they're by themselves, they're not too much of an issue to deal with. And so I begin trying to catch the host, but I'm just a little bit late, don't manage to catch them going up the elevator, and eventually they do end up fog walling me. So I had a lot of fun in that particular invasion. I feel like I don't often invade in this type of area, but when you do have, you know, the space like that to kind of bait your opponents into some dangerous elements of the environment, it's definitely a good idea to do so. All right, so moving on, we have the duel portion of this showcase, and this first player I was really happy to see was using the Raptor Talons as well, and they were using the Gigas Thickus build, which involves the Blood Flame buff as well. So you can definitely go for a bleed route with this. It's very strong, but you'll see in the course of this duel that the poison might just be a little bit better. So they go for Impaling Thrust, which is definitely a cool Ash of War to put on this particular weapon since it does lack so much range. I kind of hop over them, and we both kind of know what each other is trying to do. I think, you know, having this type of fight was pretty fun, and, you know, we'll also see kind of how Cragblade takes advantage of the extra ability to stun lock our opponents. And here we can see the poison actually is a factor in this. They start running away, and when they go for a bolus, I'm able to catch them. So a really nice element of poison, especially in duels, is that, you know, when your opponent is low health and poisoned, they have to make a decision if they want to go for a bolus or if they want to get, you know, try to kill you basically immediately. And oftentimes they'll try to go for a bolus, and that will leave them susceptible to being hit. So next up we have a player with the Serpent Hunter Great Spear. and this is definitely a weapon to be wary of. The crouch pokes with this are very strong. I'm able to kind of get a nice read on my opponent and land a jumping attack. They go for a poison bolus right there, and I was really hoping to catch them with their roll with a running heavy attack, but don't manage to just quite. But sometimes if you know you're going to be late on the arrival of kind of when they go for a poison bolus, you can expect that they're going to roll out of it. So it's better to try to wait and get a roll catch than just kind of miss, because the roll is pretty predictable. And here again, we have an instance where they're pretty low health and they go for a poison bolus, and I stay close enough so I can grab that kill real quick. And poison is a very useful status proc, I would say, and it doesn't have to be rot, even though rot is kind of objectively better. Next up we have another duel, and this is going to involve some cross naginatas as well as some seppuku. So kind of a bold move to seppuku in a duel, since you're not going to be able to heal yourself, but totally up to them. They've got the highest form of dueling emblem, so clearly they're doing something successful often. So I go for a bleed bolus when I feel like I have enough space. They do manage to get some phantom hits on me, but it's not enough to cause the full blood loss buildup. And here I go for a jumping attack. Rolling into your opponent with cross naginatas as well as jumping is going to be helpful. And then here again, a low health player with poison, and I don't really need to rush them. And once they start walking, I think maybe their stamina is low or they're just completely out of stamina, so I turn around and go for a light attack that kind of catches them. And that was a successful way to deal with cross naginatas, which can absolutely obliterate you if you're not careful. Next up we have a dual katana player, and they've got Moonveil as well as a Uchi katana, and this is going to be a decent amount of spacing. I am very wary of the amount of damage that they can do with the Moonveil, as I think one normally is, and the Nagakiba is also going to be a bit of a factor here. I think I said Uchikatana, I meant Nagakiba. So that's just, two weapons that have decently wide AoEs or just general large sweeps in general. And we're both doing a decent job of kind of avoiding each other's incoming damage. They do get a couple light attacks on me, but with the extra poise that I have, it's not enough to stun lock me. So having high poise, I think, is pretty essential for a build like this. And then here they go for some pretty predictable rolls, but I'm not actually able to stun lock them. And then here we can kind of just see how useful it is to trade with this weapon, especially against lighter weapons, and then the poison is just enough to kind of end them. So, lots of definitely good players, lots of strong builds that are all, poison is a factor in a lot of these invasions. So next up we have another Raptor Talons player, and this was another fun one to see just because, Raptor Talons against Raptor Talons is pretty cool. So they're going for a jumping based build. You can see they're using Raptors of the Mist as well as the chest piece that gives you extra jumping attack damage bonus, but I think the successive attack bonus is going to be stronger. Jump attacks are a little bit slow. They add extra recovery time, and against Raptor Talons that are, buffed with Cragblade or something, it's going to be hard to really win out on those trades frequently enough. So next up we have a player with dual curve swords, and here again we can just see how effective the trades are with this particular weapon. Trying to trade with either fists or claws with Cragblade is going to be pretty rough. And next up we have a player that's utilizing kind of a bleed buildup. They have some of the Briar incantations that are definitely something to look out for. The timing is a little bit weird because I feel like you don't see that too much in PvE, but I'm able to get at least a partial hit on that first kind of running heavy and then just begin the chase down, and right before the Dragon Breath or probably Grail's Roar or Placidus X Ruin goes off, I'm able to land a jumping attack. So that's kind of just the importance of playing really aggressively in duels when you've got a weapon like this. If you give your opponent any space and time, they'll probably be in a good spot to counter it. So next up we have just a Claymore player, which I love to see. Definitely respect that. And they also have a parry shield. Here I'm able to kind of punish the use of the bolus. So again, people using boluses is going to be an effective element of this build for sure. And they, managed to get the bolus off, but I still get the jumping attack. So I'm trying to space them as well as I can and then roll catch them. I definitely need to be wary of the impaling thrust here, or piercing fang rather. And eventually I do manage to land a light attack, which is, effective enough to end the fight. So definitely something to look out for again, but nothing too intense. So next up we have a player that is utilizing a katana, and they're also going for some boiled crab, so I do the same. And that's kind of how I typically buff, aside for, going for something like Crag Blade is just, if my opponent uses boiled crab, I will as well. And then this last duel rather, is kind of funny. We have a player that's going for some incantations and some kind of, it seems like an intelligence build overall. So we're able to kind of just space the incoming Carrion Slicer, and then Carrion Piercer we're able to roll and just get a couple quick hits off, and my opponent is just like, okay, this is over, and just kind of dies from the poison. So definitely a fun one that I enjoyed. As always, if you made it this far, I just wanted to say thanks so much for watching. I really appreciate everybody's support. And if you do have any questions about the build or want to suggest future builds, definitely let me know in the comments below. I'm always happy to check those out and consider making them. So yeah, that's all I've got, and I hope you have a good one.